We know the Commanders' 2022 opponents, but which one will be the first that we play? I'm Evan from DMV Sports Zone, and I'm going to give my attempt to answer just that very question.
Sports Zone.
Chased down by Beal in the corner for three, gets fouled and hits.
Welcome to DC.
Well, they tied him out.
You know where you're at the USA Cup. You're taking it slightly. I'm taking it slightly. Now how you gon' act on you gon' be right back. When we gon' be right here. We gon' be right here. We ain't going nowhere. Welcome to DC. DC, the home of Chuck Brown. Oh, you don't know the sound? Well, let me break.
But before we get into it, here's a quick rundown of all the teams the Commanders will face in 2022. First and foremost, you have the 6 games against the traditional NFC East opponents. That's the usual home and home with the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, and the Philadelphia Eagles. In addition, the NFC East is playing the NFC North this year, so that's home games against the Packers and the Vikings, and the Commanders travel to Chicago and Detroit. The NFC East is also playing the AFC South, which means home games against the Texans and the Jaguars. And in addition, the Commanders go to Indianapolis and Tennessee. And also, the last 3 games, since the Commanders finished 3rd place in the NFC East last season, they will also play last year's 3rd place team from the NFC South, that being the Atlanta Falcons, and they come here. They also play last year's 3rd place team from the NFC West, that being the San Francisco 49ers, and that game will be in San Francisco. And the additional 17th game is against the 3rd place team from the AFC North a year ago, the Cleveland Browns, and that will be here. Now, which ones of those games do I feel like could be the week one opener? Okay, so I've highlighted 3 games, possibly 4, on the Commanders' schedule that I feel like could be the week 1 game based on the storyline of said matchup. Now, I said possibly 4. I'll get to that part later, but I will list these out in ascending order of which one I think should be the opener. And that means I'm going to start from number 3, go up to number 1 like that. So the first game on my list is the road game at Indianapolis. Like, the story is pretty simple here. It's Carson Wentz's first game since being traded from the Colts. And while that is an intriguing storyline, there's not really too much more to this matchup at this point in time that would put it above the other games on the schedule. So while I feel like Indianapolis could be a solid week 1 opponent for the Commanders, I'm not really too crazy about that matchup. Now on to the next one. So remember when I said there was 3, possibly 4 games on this list? Yeah, here's the 2 and 1. The home game against the Eagles and the road game against the Eagles. Now, why do I say both of these games? Well, first and foremost, there's the Carson Wentz plays against the Eagles, the team that drafted him, for the first time in his career, which would make the road game that much more intriguing if this was in Philadelphia. But the home game still does have its level of spice too, because for the first time, because if it is a home game, we'll get in week 1, right off the bat, our first look at the Commanders' new uniforms, be it red or black, whichever one they decide to wear, although we would get our first look at the white ones if they choose to go the Indianapolis route as well. They'd also go the white route for Philadelphia too. But anyway, back to the point. What puts both of these games above Indianapolis in my eyes is, with the Eagles, it's not just Carson Wentz versus his former team. It's also a rematch between 2 of the teams that went neck and neck for that last playoff spot. As in, when the Commanders went into Philadelphia for their first game against the Eagles, or at least the then football team, Washington had the last wild card spot, and then the Eagles beat them and took it. And then in the rematch, the Commanders Washington still had a chance to make it in the playoffs if they won that game. But then the Eagles came up with a big score at the end of the game and a big stop, stole the game, and took the playoff spot. So this will be the first game of a new chapter, although any week one opponent would be. But it would also be a shot at revenge. Plus a good old division rivalry. Who can't say no to that? Like, who would say no to that? The only reason I could think of for why anyone would say no is because the Eagles have been the week one opponent for Washington a lot recently. There was 2019, there was 2017, there was 2020. So I'd understand if anybody in the fan base was eagled out. But now it's time for number one. But before we get to number one, I got to talk about why every other game on the Commanders' schedule is not going to be included here, because there is one game that stands above all of them. The reason why is because they all offer the storyline of this is the first game as the Washington Commanders, the next chapter starts now. But most games on this list, as it stands now, most games on the schedule don't really offer any more story than just the first game the first game in Commanders history, and that's it. Every game that I've listed so far also includes that first game in Commanders history, that new chapter feel, and then something else on top of that, which makes the matchup even more intriguing. But now, on to number one. So if you know me and you've been following along with me on Twitter, I'm at the Voice of Evan on Twitter, then you already knew this was coming. But for those that have not, and for those that may be new here, here's my number one. I want the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. The reason why is because just like any other game on the schedule, this game would offer the chance of, the storyline of it's the first game in the history of the Washington Commanders. It's a new era, new chapter, fresh new start, and all that. But what a game against the Cowboys specifically would also offer is a battle between the last two NFC East champions. Washington won in 2020 and Dallas won in 2021. And the reason why I want it at home is also because of the whole new chapter thing. We get our first look at the end zones, the new logo at at midfield. I don't know why I keep calling it half court. My brain is still in March Madness mode. Please forgive me, y'all. But what a matchup with the Cowboys would also offer beyond the new chapter, beyond the last two NFC East champions, it's a duel between the last two defensive rookies of the year, Chase Young versus Micah Parsons. And to sweeten the deal, since Chase missed both games last year against the Cowboys, it is still true that Chase Young is undefeated against Dallas in his professional career, and it's also true that Micah Parsons is undefeated against Washington in his professional career. So you put those two together, and something has to give. And in the end, first game in Commanders history, what better way to bring in the new chapter of Washington football than with an age-old rivalry against the Cowboys? So that's my number one. Well, that's my take. So who do you want the Commanders to open up against, or who do you think they'll open up against? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, I'm Evan from DMV Sports Zone, signing off. Let's go, Commanders.